Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, August the 16th, 2024. It is currently 1:08 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. August. Does that month mean anything to you? The month of August, does it mean anything to you? Well, for some of you, because today is August the 16th, it probably holds very important significance to you. If maybe significance is not a word. It may have an impact on you, or at least it did a number of years ago, because it was on August the 16th, 1977, at 3:30 p.m. Central Time, that Elvis Presley passed away. August the 16th, I believe it was 1977 at 3:30 p.m. Central Time, Elvis Presley passed away, and that had a profound impact on many people, right? I'll never forget it because I was sitting at home. It was the afternoon. Me and my brother were just sitting there watching television. I don't know what we were doing. We were just sitting there. Next thing you know, the front door just it felt like someone kicked the front door in, and my mother came in yelling and screaming, "Elvis is dead! Elvis is dead! Elvis is dead!" And we were like, what is going on? Okay, everything will be okay. But many people probably had similar reactions who were alive at that time, who were old enough to kind of grow up with Elvis, or was a teenager when Elvis was, rising to his, popularity and fame and becoming this kind of pop culture icon that he became. Whether you liked his music, disliked his music, whether you liked him or disliked him, whether you thought his music was of the devil, whatever the case may be, you cannot deny his cultural impact. But, August the 16th, a lot of people will remember, when August comes around, that's what they remember. August the 16th. That's the day Elvis Presley died. But do you remember anything else about August? Now, this is far less significant. This probably will have no impact on you at all. But it was August the 7th, 2022. August the 7th, 2022, when I preached what would be at that time the last message in our series on the book of Romans. I know it has no significance to you, but it was August the 7th, 2022. Now, from that moment, we took a turn, and we stayed working on something very, very important that was very adjacent, very much connected to the book of Romans. And that was our very long series on law and gospel. That came out of the book of Romans, right? So we'd been working on the book of Romans, and then I felt this absolute important need to discuss the proper distinction between law and gospel. And we started a lot of work on the book of Romans at that time. I think it was very beneficial. In fact, I still believe that our series on law and gospel is the most important series I have ever done. I do believe. Other people may think, no, I liked this. No, law and gospel, that distinction, maybe it's the most important because it's more needed than it's ever been needed in the history of American Christianity. But the blurring of the lines between law and gospel is at a crisis level. And, I think what we did there was very important. So then it was like, okay, we still need to do more work on law and gospel, but then how do we get back to the book of Romans? How do we get back to the book of Romans? At about 4 a.m., maybe 5 a.m. in the morning, I was listening to, I think I was listening to Fundamental Broadcasting Network, FBN. I think I had FBN on. Yeah, I'm almost positive. And I don't even know the name of the program. I don't know the name of the preacher. I have no idea what he was talking about, but because I was kind of like asleep, half asleep, awake, not awake. I don't even know. I don't know if I was even in my right state of mind, but all of a sudden he mentioned a word, and he mentioned it as it's found in the book of Romans. And that word is therefore. therefore. And he started talking about, just briefly, it wasn't even his main point, is how therefore is utilized a lot in the book of Romans. And it's a very significant word. So I just kind of like noted it in my brain. I'm like, okay, remember this, remember this, remember this. And then I went back out. I slipped it back into oblivion. Well, then when I woke up, I kept thinking about that today. Well, therefore in the book of Romans. Okay, well, what do I do with this? You know what? I could do this for a Bible pop quiz, right? I could turn on the microphone and go, welcome everyone to a Bible pop quiz for this Friday, August the 16th, 2024. Here's what we're going to do today. Your job is to find every therefore in the book of Romans and kind of make it as an assignment. So I thought about doing that. I'm like, that'd be a quick broadcast. It would be simple. It would be easy. Go. And then just move on with my day. So I thought about doing that. Then I thought, well, wait a minute. That's the book of Romans. Man, we were working in the book of Romans. We're kind of done with Psalm 83. So if we're done with Psalm 83, I've got to do something. This would not like be an easy transition back into the book of Romans, but it would be a great way to kind of work our way through the entirety of the book in a unique way. So I'm like, you know what I'll do? I'll start kind of a study within our study. Within our study of the book of Romans, we will do a study of all of the therefores in the book of Romans. So within our study of the book of Romans, we'll do a study of all the therefores within the book of Romans. And then this will have us go all the way back to the beginning of the book, work our way through all the material we've already looked at, and then advance forward. And then we can kind of circle back and start back, I think, in chapter 10, and then go back verse by verse through 10, 11, 12, and finish up the book. I think we could possibly pull this off somehow. I think this could work. So I just started trying to think about it. I'm like, well, what can we do? What can we not do? I'm like, well, at least let's throw out the introduction and we'll just see how this works for a couple of weeks, because it's going to take us a while. And here's the reason why. The word therefore appears 27 times in the book of Romans in the King James Version. 27 times. Now, I did find it weird. I looked up on the Blue Letter Bible app, therefore, and then it skipped Romans 1:24, where it says, therefore God also gave them up. I don't know why. I'm like, it's therefore there. I don't know, because maybe I didn't have the T capitalized. I don't know. It gave me the others, but it skipped that one. So maybe I'll have to make sure I do it without a capital T and with a capital T. I don't know. I'd have to go back and mess with it. But other sources tell me there are 27 times. So maybe it's 26, maybe it's 28, maybe there's some disagreement, but around 27 times the word therefore appears in the book of Romans. Now that's quite a few times. Now, typically what we say when we see a therefore, we ask, what is it there for? Right? And I think that's just a clever way. We've all heard that. You've heard that said in church a million times, but I think it's significant as when we were working about a week ago. Remember, we were working in the book of Ephesians, right? We were working in the book of Ephesians. I'm going to turn there. We were looking at Ephesians chapter 4. I, therefore. And remember, I focused on the fact that was a transitional, that in Ephesians 4:1, therefore, serves as a transitional term. It's transitioning from the theological exposition to the practical exposition. And remember, we still got to get back to Ephesians 4 and do some work on that. But we've already been talking a little bit about therefore. Well, if it's used 27 times, each time it's got a significance. There's something. Is it a transition? Is it comparing contrast? Like all the different things it could possibly do. So that is what we're going to do. Beginning on Sunday at Victory Baptist Church, what we are going to do is we're going to launch into a study of every therefore in the book of Romans. Maybe we'll just make it primarily, it happens there. Maybe we'll do some supplemental work here on the podcast. But here's what your assignment is. I need you to look up every therefore in the book of Romans. And I need you to just look it up and then just write down the reference. Write down the reference. Read it. Write it down. Now, it's easy to just make a list, but I need you to look up each reference, read it, and write it down. And then as you read it, try to just write out a very, one sentence reason why you think it's there. Just one sentence. And it doesn't matter. It can just be like your just very first impression. This, therefore, is there for this reason. Right? And then, when we work through it, we will try to expand on that. All right. According to one source, the word therefore appears 27 times in the book of Romans. This number may vary slightly depending on the translation, as different versions might use synonyms like so or then. And some instances where the original Greek word, often translated as therefore, appears. Okay. So in other words, in some instances, you're going to get some variation depending on the translation, because some will translate it therefore and some may translate it so or then. This frequent use underscores how Paul continually draws conclusions from his theological arguments and applies them to practical living. So simply put, just as we found in Ephesians 4, every time we see a therefore, there is a high probability that what Paul is doing is he is underscoring how he continually draws conclusions from his theological arguments and applies them to practical living. So it's almost like, here's the theological reality. Therefore, now this is how it should play out practically. We in a roundabout way, we did this in a real way in Psalm 83 when we talked about prayer, right? The way so many people pray, they're thinking about prayer, their discussion about prayer, they're talking about prayer, almost inevitably does not actually flow from proper theological understanding. Because if you have a proper theological understanding of God allowing something to happen, or not doing anything to intervene to stop it, or literally, depending on your theology, decreeing it, and in his providence directing it, that theological reality should lead to a therefore, this is how you should pray. So what we did is we looked at theological perspectives on God and how this should impact how you pray. Well, I know people who hold to those theological understandings of God, and they don't pray that way. They pray contradictory to their theology. Well, our theology should lead to practice or practical application that is consistent with our theology. Now, that's the inevitable war with every Christian. We have theological things we believe about God. We just don't practically live consistently with it. And I'm not just talking about sin. I'm just talking about the way we think, our philosophies, our perspectives. We don't always act. It's just like a church that will say, theologically, we hold to the regulative principle. Well, then your church is doing this and this and this. The regulative principle would not allow that. So you say you hold to the regulative principle, but you're violating it. You just hold to the regulative principle because you don't want that in your church, and you use the regulative principle as an excuse to keep that out. But you're not really following it. I mean, I could give you countless examples of this kind of thing, of how these things take place. This is the struggle. Well, therefore is going to challenge us. Okay, how does this theological truth, what do we do with it practically? Whatever theological truth you have, right? You just name you just start writing down the theological truths you hold to. Well, what should be the practical outcome of that theological truth? So the frequent use of therefore underscores how Paul continually draws conclusions from his theological arguments and applies them to practical living. All right. There are a number of lessons that one can take from the use of therefore. There are a number of lessons that we should be able to take from the frequent use of therefore in the book of Romans. I'm just going to throw out some of these. I'm not going to explain them very much. I'm just going to throw them out because you'll probably hear me talk about this again on Sunday. All right. So because Sunday will probably kind of serve as an introduction as well. I may call that therefore part 1. I don't know. But this is just trying to get everyone ready. So here's what, again, your assignment: look up every therefore in the book of Romans. Read it. then look at the verses before, look at the verses after, and then just write out a 1-sentence summary of what the therefore is there for. Right? Try to explain it. And if you say, well, he's transitioning from theology to practice, well, then explain what was the theological truths, and then now what is the practical truth or the practical application he's drawing from it. Just summarize it. It doesn't have to be a detailed explanation. It can just be he's going from the theological truth of sin to the practical application of grace, or whatever the case may be. Again, I'm just trying to give you very simple ways of doing it. So look up every use of the word therefore, write them down, and then write a 1-sentence summary of what the therefore is there for. Right? You can work on that. Then when I work through them, you may go, wait a minute, that's not what I came up with, and that'll be perfectly okay. You'll get different perspectives. Also, what you can do for the Sermons 2.0 app challenge, it's Friday. From this Friday till next Friday, look up sermons for the therefores in the book of Romans. The first therefore is Romans 1:24. Therefore God also gave them up to uncleanliness. All right, now, look up sermons on Romans 1:24 and see how they handled the therefore. You may agree, you may disagree. Now, in Romans 1:24, God also gave them. Who's the them? All right, we get into a lot of discussions here. There's a lot of things we could do in Romans 1:24. I'm not going to go back and preach it all. But again, so you've got clear assignments. Look up every use of the word therefore in the book of Romans. Write them down. Read the verses before and after, write out a 1-sentence summary of why it's there, then start listening to sermons for the therefores in the book of Romans for the Sermons 2.0 app sermon challenge. See how I try to bring all these things together? All right. Then you can listen to what we start at Sunday at Victory Baptist Church and our series on the book of Romans, where now the series on the book of Romans is going to turn into therefore, and we're going to go back through the entire book of things we've already covered to then catch us up. Then we can advance through and finish up the book at some point. That is at least that is the goal. We have no idea if that will happen. We don't. There's a lot of uncertainties, obviously, when it comes to the church right now. So we will see how that advances. So I think this will be, and even if it doesn't, even if we can't finish it at the church, we can finish it right here. All right. So one way or the other, we will finish the therefores. I don't know if we'll ever finish the book of Romans, but we will finish the therefores because that's I think that's manageable to do, especially in a podcast format. All right. So you want some of the major lessons we can possibly learn from the use of therefore. All right. Here's one. Doctrine leads to practice. I think I would, if I was to rewrite that now that I see it, doctrine should lead to practice. Or I maybe even rewrite it again. Theology should lead to practice. Your theological understanding should impact practical application. It should. The reason I stress should is so many times it doesn't. In fact, again, I think prayer is a great example. So the way people think about prayer, I know they'll say it comes from Scripture, but so much of it is contrary to their theological understanding of God. It really is. And they never seem to catch on or never seem to understand. I'm like, wait a minute, we got to pray about this situation. So you want me to pray to the very God who knew this situation would happen and did nothing to prevent it from happening? Now you want me to pray to him to change it, even though he knew it was going to happen and didn't stop it from happening in the first place? But now you want me to convince him to stop what he allowed in the first place? Or, depending on your theological understanding, now you want me to pray to the God who not only knew this was going to happen, decreed that it would happen before the foundations of the world, and then in his providence is guiding and directing it. Now you want me to pray for him to change it? That seems to be going against his will. Those are theological realities that should impact your practical understanding of prayer. It's like people who reject, say, a Calvinistic understanding of salvation. We've got to pray for these people's salvation. Well, you believe in the complete libertarian free will of man. What do you want God to do? Do you want God to impose something upon their free will? Punish them for what do you want? Or do you want God to respect their free will? If God, then why are you praying for? What can God do? He has to respect their free will, or it's not free. Right? So then there's always these contradictory things. But I think we should just write down a very simple lesson is theology should lead to practice. Now, I'm already kind of giving more information than I want, but I just want you to write some of these things down. All right. Next, there is a logical flow of theological arguments. Therefore, demonstrates a logical flow of theological arguments. Theological arguments should have a logical flow. If you're making theological arguments, there should be a logical flow. There should be a logical way they are being developed. Therefore, demonstrates Paul does that. He's logically proceeding. There's a logical flow in his discussions and arguments. Therefore, could possibly be used to underscore the universality of sin and salvation. The universality of sin and salvation. Now, I'm not talking about universalism. I'm talking about the universality that this impacts everyone. Sin and salvation. Therefore, also can be used to demonstrate the importance of response to God's grace. Possibly. Next, it could be used to demonstrate the assurance of salvation and its implications. Possibly. All right, so let's go through these again. Therefore, we should learn the lesson of how doctrine of theology should lead to practice. Number 2, it should demonstrate the logical flow of theological arguments. Number 3, it should demonstrate possibly the universality of sin and salvation. Now, with all of these, you can put a little question mark. These are hypotheses. These are concepts I'm throwing out. I am not being dogmatic. We may work through these after we're done looking at all the therefores and determine we disagree with all of these. All right. So just make sure you keep that in mind. Next, the importance of response to God's grace. Therefore, sometimes demonstrates the importance of responding to God's grace. Next, the assurance of salvation and its implications. The assurance of salvation and its implications. Next, unity and community in the body of Christ. Now, that one I'm very skeptical of. Therefore, should teach us about unity and community in the body of Christ. You know how jaded I am when it comes to that. Next, ethical living as a response to God's sovereignty. Therefore, demonstrates ethical living as a response to God's sovereignty. Did you get all of those? Do you need me to do them one more time? I just heard someone say yes. Number 1, therefore. What we can learn from the use of therefore in the book of Romans is that theology or doctrine leads to practice. Number 2, it should teach us the logical flow of theological arguments. Number 3, it should teach us something about the universality of sin and salvation. Number 4, it should teach us the importance of responding to God's grace. Number 5, it should give some kind of assurance of salvation and its implications. Number 6, it has something to do possibly with unity and community in the body of Christ. That one I'm not so sure of. And next, ethical living as a response to God's sovereignty. That one I think possibly is a little bit more, I think I can possibly do something with that one. All right. That is therefore. All right. Now, the first one I see, the first one you're going to have to deal with, I believe, is Romans 1:24, where we read these words. Therefore, God also gave them up to the uncleanliness and the lust of their hearts to dishonor their bodies among themselves. That's the first one. I believe the second one is in chapter 2, Verse 1, therefore you are inexcusable, O man. I think that's the second one. I think the third one doesn't show up. I don't think the third one shows up till chapter 4. I think it's verse... let's see, where's the next one? Is it 4:16? Yeah, therefore it is of faith that it might be according to the grace, so that the promises might be sure to all the seed, and not only to those who are of the law, but also to those who are of the faith of Abraham, who is the father of us all. Yeah, I think that's the next one, right? So the point is, work through them. I say I want to start teaching them. Therefore, in the book of Romans, so your assignment is very simple. Find every one, read every therefore in the book of Romans. Write down the reference. Then write down a one-sentence summary of what the therefore is there for. Right? If you say, well, this is a transition from this section to this section, then what is it transitioning from? Right? It was talking about sin. Now, therefore, here's grace. Or whatever the case may be. Here's grace, therefore this. Whatever the case may be. If it's there for a different reason, whatever the case may be, just summarize it. Simple. And you're just going with your first impression. Don't overthink it. Just go, here's what I see. You may be completely right. You may be completely wrong. The rest of the study will then demonstrate it. Then you start looking up sermons on the Sermons 2.0 app on those therefores. So if the first one is Romans 1:24, you're going to look up a sermon on Romans 1:24. Then you're going to look up a sermon on Romans 2:1. Then you're going to look up a sermon on Romans 4:16. And then you'll hear how they handled the therefore. It may be according to the way you did it. And then you'll start listening to then my working through the therefores. And then we'll see what we can come up with. Now, I've given you some things to look out for. I'm giving you some possible lessons you'll learn from those therefores. But those are hypotheses. Those are not dogmatic assertions. I took those from a different source. And then we will call them into question, of course. All right? I could give you more assignments, but I think that's a good place to start. All right? There we go. The last time we were in the book of Romans was August the 7th, 2022. Here we are, August the 16th, 2024. 2 years plus after we stopped, and we did that long study on law and gospel. Well, now we're going to kind of return to the book of Romans, but we're going to do so in a unique way. Instead of just trying to go back we're going to work right back through the book, looking at all the therefores, which should then help us hit every major section and every major transition between one to another. So it should get us somewhat back on the same page. And even if it doesn't get us back on the same page, it will be an interesting look at this very common word used over 20-something times, 24, 27 times in the book of Romans itself. And it also will be a hermeneutical exercise in trying to figure out what it's there for, which will only help you whenever you see therefore anywhere else. You'll know what is it there for. All right. I think it's a good idea. I'm going to convince myself it's a great idea. I'm going to tell myself, what a great idea. This is absolutely brilliant. I can't even believe. Okay, all right. Now I'm being ridiculous. All right. Let's look here. I am curious. Yeah, okay. The map is not working, telling me 0 people listen to this. So that's great. If nobody listened, well, then, then this didn't really happen. I'll just delete it. No, I'm not going to delete it because this really gets us set up for Sunday. Now, well, hopefully the members of Victory Baptist Church will listen. You'll be the first to know, right? So on Sunday, when I'm like, all right, guys, everyone knows what we're doing today, right? And when everyone looks at me like they don't, you'll know, wow, that's embarrassing. Okay. Should I do that? Should I do that? Yeah, there's a part of me that wants to do that, but I won't accomplish anything other than making everyone mad that I'm putting them on the spot. But yeah, we will see. All right, I want to dig into one right now. I want to dig into one, right? Don't you want to? I mean, that first one seems pretty straightforward, right? Yeah, I mean, yeah. I could ask some difficult questions about the first one, couldn't you? All right. I'll stop right there. All right. Thanks for listening. There's your assignments. Go forth and work. All right. Go forth and do the work. You will benefit greatly from it. And of course, you're utilizing the Sermons 2.0 app, which that's helping us maintain our challenge. I know it's already, can you believe it's already August the 16th, ladies and gentlemen? Can you believe this? Before you know it, August will be September, and then it's going to be October. Then we're going to get to Thanksgiving, and then it's going to be Christmas, and then it's going to be New Year's Eve. And then we're saying hello to 2025. Wow. And then the Sermons 2.0 app challenge will be over. I sure hope you've gotten something from that. I really do. I hope you have. All right. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day, and God bless.